All right, so today we're going to dig into a really cool piece of the Effect platform, something that's a total game changer for how you build server-side apps. I'm talking about the HTTP server. Let's jump right in and see what makes it so special. Okay, so every single one of us has been here, right? You're staring at your code and you think, how in the world do I build a web server that's modern, super easy to test, and here's the kicker, portable. You know, something you can run anywhere without a massive rewrite. It's a huge, fundamental challenge for developers. And honestly, the Effect platform's answer to this is just surprisingly elegant.
So to really get why their solution is so good, we first have to talk a little bit about typical server-side architecture and, the big problem that almost always crops up.
And here it is, the core issue. Your server code, it gets completely glued to its environment. Like, if you're writing for Node.js, your code is pretty much trapped inside the Node.js world. And what does that mean? Well, it means testing your logic in isolation becomes a total nightmare. And pointing it to something new and exciting, like Bun, forget about it. It's a massive, painful project. Okay, and this is where the whole Effect philosophy just shines. See, instead of trying to fight this tight coupling, they just design the problem away from the very beginning, which brings us to the absolute central pillar of their server-side design, the HTTP server. So what is this thing, really? Well, you can think of the HTTP server as this beautiful, clean abstraction layer. Its entire job, its only purpose, is to create a separation between your application logic, what we call the HttpApp, and the actual runtime it's sitting on. We're talking Node.js, Bun, whatever comes next. It just separates them.
All right, let's get into the mechanics a bit, because this is where the magic really happens. So the HTTP server, it takes your application, and this is key, it doesn't just run it. Instead, it converts your entire app into a declarative effect value. Now, if you're not familiar, just think of an effect as a blueprint or a recipe for a computation. It describes what needs to be done, but it doesn't do it yet. The server itself then becomes the execution layer that just runs this blueprint for every single request. Oh, and it's also defined as a context.tag, which is basically Effect's way of doing dependency injection, making it super easy to access. It's just a beautifully thought out, decoupled system.
Okay, I know this all sounds a little abstract, a little theoretical, so to really get a feel for how powerful this decoupling thing is, let's use a super simple analogy. I think this will make it click.
First up, just imagine your entire web application is an electronic device. It can be anything, your laptop, a phone charger, whatever. The point is, it has a very specific job to do, and it needs power to do it. Okay, now think about the runtime, like Node.js. That runtime is like a specific type of wall socket. Let's say it's one of those European-style sockets. Well, if your device has a North American plug, you're totally out of luck. They just don't fit. They are not compatible, and you can't get power.
And this is the punchline. The HTTP server, it is that universal adapter. You know, that one simple, ingenious little device that you plug in the middle? It makes your application completely compatible with any socket, any runtime you need to plug into. All of a sudden, that whole compatibility problem, it just vanishes.
Okay, so that's the concept, right? The big idea. Now let's look at how we actually use this universal adapter. How do we plug it in and bring our server to life? And believe it or not, it all comes down to this one super elegant method, serve. This is really the heart of the whole thing. As you can see, it just takes your application, and then if you want, you can add any middleware you need.
And what it does is incredibly straightforward. Seriously, it's this simple. Step 1, it takes your HTTP application. Step 2, it layers on any optional middleware you've got, for stuff like logging or authentication. And then step 3, this is the most important part. It returns a single effect value. Again, it hasn't run a thing. It just hands you back a complete, detailed description of your server, all wrapped up and ready to be given to the effect runtime to actually execute.
Look, this whole clean, declarative approach, it might seem like a subtle detail, but I promise you, the benefits you get from it are absolutely massive for building modern software. So let's wrap this up by talking about why this architecture is so darn important.
It really boils down to 3 huge, game-changing advantages. First, you get true portability. I'm talking about taking your app and running it on Node, then on Bun, then on whatever comes next with literally 0 code changes. That's huge. Second, you get incredible testability. Since your entire app is just a value before it's run, you can test all of your logic without ever spinning up a real live server. Your tests become blazing fast and super reliable. And finally, you get clarity. This design just forces you into a clean separation of concerns.
Your architecture is cleaner, and your code becomes way easier to understand, to maintain, and just to reason about.
And all of this really brings us back to one core idea. The power of Effect's HTTP server doesn't come from some complex feature. It comes from a single, powerful principle: abstraction. And it kind of forces us to ask a much bigger question, doesn't it? Is this kind of thoughtful, deliberate abstraction, is that the real key to building robust software that can actually stand the test of time?